this quarterly project developer training, third quarter of the year. So these are the topics today. So first of all, an introduction to the people presenting. So my name is Richard Iliff. I'm Compliance Director at SustainCert. So I'm joining this presentation because your usual host for this event, Neha, is not feeling especially well today, so I'll be doing the bulk of the presenting, and I'll be joining you from the start and handing over to Neha halfway through. So Neha, do you want to introduce yourself quickly?
Thanks, Richard. Hi, everyone. Hope you all are doing well. I hope you know me from some of the past presentations that you might have joined. My name is Neha, and I'm the Director of Stakeholder Relations at SustainCert, working very closely with Richard. And I'll be taking you through some of the recent rule updates and clarifications in the later half of the training today. Over to you, Richard.
Right. Thanks, Neha. Okay, so yeah, as you probably gathered, the purpose of today's session is twofold. So for the first half, we'll be covering the recent update to templates. I'll be covering this section, and Neha will take you through the standard gold standard rule updates session. So just to talk you through what we're going to cover today. So first of all, we're going to talk about the rationale to the decision to change these templates. Then I'll go through some of the key changes that you as project developers need to be aware of. I'll go through as a kind of broad brush approach, and then hone in on some detail that I think will be of use to you. And then hand over to Neha to talk about some of the internal change management that we put in place to make sure this change is as smooth as possible. And Neha will then go through the gold standard rules. Okay, so first of all, the rationale. So what we were thinking behind changing the templates is that these are the way that people demonstrate compliance with the standard. Gold standard rules can be complex, and they can be hard to spot. So the templates are a good communication tool between the rules and the people who check the rules, so VVBs and ourselves in SustainCert. So what we figured was that if we were to improve these templates, it would better guide project developers on what information must be included in submissions. And we also wanted the templates to do a little bit more than that. They would also act as a kind of signpost to the rules as well, and just provide people with a bit more understanding about why rules are in certain places and where those rules could be found in the standard. It's important to clarify that they're not supposed to replace the standard. You've still got to read and understand gold standard rules, but we hope the templates provide a solid foundation for that. So we figured that if these templates were a bit clearer and a bit more direct in terms of what information was needed, there would be a more universal understanding of gold standard rules. And a sort of phrase that we use internally, it comes from some of the colleagues we've been working on IT platforms, is a single source of truth. And so I think that one's quite important. We want to minimize different understandings of gold standard rules. So what we hope to achieve with this is that project developers will have to ask us fewer questions on what it is they need to do and what information they need to supply. And in turn, SustainCert and VVBs will have to issue fewer corrections or clarifications. And what this hopefully means is that time will be saved for us all. So first thing to point out is that there is a 3-month grace period for these new templates. So they were published on the 13th and 14th of October. You can still use the older versions. However, we encourage you to start using new versions as soon as possible. We hope to convince you of that during this presentation. We hope these things will be of benefit to you, and it's in your interest to switch as soon as possible. One thing to draw your attention to that we put in place for each of the templates, there is an email address for anyone, whether you're a project developer, VDB, or even stakeholder community. They can share feedback on the templates with a dedicated email address. To let you know, we did reach out to project developers in this template revision. So part of our revisions was based just on feedback we'd received from developers proactively, but we also reached out during the development phase to gather people's feedback. I would say we've not managed to implement all of the really useful suggestions people have made, but they have guided us in the process. We've also worked with Gold Standard, as you would expect as well. So the key headline changes really are that the main thing is actually improved guidance and examples for some of the things where we know that people have different understandings. So one of the areas where we've seen this happen a lot is in the key project information, so the summary box at the start of each template, and SDG demonstrations, and also the safeguarding principles assessment. So we hope with these detailed guides to align people's thinking. We've also focused on closing some of the gaps. So I'm going to spend some time talking about the stakeholder consultation report. There are a number of gaps in there, but just as a couple of other examples, so gender sensitivity was missing in the VPA-DD, but was present in the PDD. And for instance, there was no dedicated space for environmental impact assessment or compliance with local law. So we've closed those gaps. A couple of other things that we think will help with usability is that there is a title page with hyperlinks to aid scrolling through the documents quickly. And we've also tried to align the structure with the CDM templates where possible, with the thinking that VVBs mostly use the CDM system as their base accreditation, and also we have gold standard labeling of CER projects, so it's in everyone's interest to align where possible. So in terms of the transition process, we do have to say that these templates may mean that developers will have to update understandings, or I think in the majority of cases supply information in a different place. And this really goes to the point of aligning on a single source of truth. I think people demonstrate compliance in different ways, and different bits of information are in different documents. What these templates aim to do is ask for this information in a consistent place. One area where we know that supplying information in a different place is definitely going to pop up as something that people have questions on is the safeguarding principles assessment. I'm going to talk about that in more detail later on. So I would say that you can expect we may ask new queries to project developers, but as I say, what we're trying to do with this update is to align people's understandings about where to put information. We're pretty sure people are already complying, it's just they're demonstrating it in different ways. So we are going to prepare our internal team to expect that people will report things differently, and we are going to minimize the number of sort of new questions that we ask to project developers. And it's important to clarify as well, obviously we're aware that changing templates means that people are going to have to change the way they do things, but the reason that we did this is an investment, really. It's if we're all clearer at the start on what must be done and what must be done where, it will eventually result in a faster, more consistent review. And this point about consistency is something that we hear time and time again, and we're doing our best to resolve that by making, as a starting foundation, really, templates to force consistency, which in turn will help us internally and VVBs externally provide a more consistent assurance product. So some of the key things that we're bearing in mind is that eligibility for registered projects should not be questioned at verification. We don't anticipate that, but we are aware that in the past we have raised comments that arguably should not be raised for registered projects where we've approved aspects. We are aware of this as a risk, and we're going to be making sure that internally we have a QA system that eliminates this type of risk for you. And I guess the key point really is that we are going to be flexible to allow people to transition their approach into the new format. We don't want to force undue admin burden if integrity can be preserved. So we've borne all this in mind in the design of the templates, that there are certain ways that they are structured that were designed to minimize the burden of transition. We're also bearing that in mind proactively when we review. So for an example, the new, in inverted commas, format of SDG isn't going to be a barrier to people when they report in the monitoring reports, because it doesn't require the sort of fairly rigid format that the new PDD template requires, for instance. So I'm going to go into detail on some of the points that we have updated. So as I mentioned, the main change really is the introduction of guides. These guides are for the key templates only. So PDD, monitoring report, stakeholder consultation report, VPA and POA-DD. Some of the other documents, such as validation and verification of appraisal report, cover letter, design consultation report, they have improved inline guidance. So there is some documents have more detailed guidance. Where this happens, you will see it on the website. So I'm just going to, I've got a screenshot of it just there, but I'm going to show you what it looks like on the screen. On the wrong way. There we go. So this is what it looks like on the Gold Standard website. So the template is here, and wherever there is an additional guide available, it's here. You just click it, and then you get a PDF that matches the format of the host document. One thing I would just draw your attention to as well on this page while we're here is whenever you find one of these templates, you must pay attention to this area underneath as well, because there's quite a document hierarchy behind the scenes, whereby if whatever template you're looking at, there are certain templates that they're assigned to be in the same category. So whatever template you're looking at, it provides a window to other related templates. So just want to flag that one, because when you first look at this page, you think there's not that many templates. The way that you navigate is by going into the templates, and it will give you further options to find others. So I'm going to talk about, some of the detail. So as I mentioned, the guide provides much more structured information. So I'm going to just pinpoint those for you now. So the KPI is much more clear, we hope, and has more detailed guidance. So I'm just going to show you what it looks like in the document. So, previously on templates, there was just an empty box, whereas now there's some explanation about what each field is and what it requires, and there's also a signpost to rules and relevant information. So we hope that's useful. Another thing, there are examples for tables. So I'll just show you very quickly. So this is an estimate of impacts, sustainable development contributions. So here it shows you what an example might look like on screen, which we hope will help you fill it in a more consistent way. There's detailed guidance per section, so I'm just going to illustrate eligibility. So the previous guide on eligibility was this statement, well, this sentence really, just saying please refer to section 3.1.1. Now we've fully defined the aspects that you need to capture to demonstrate eligibility under gold standard. So, and again, just this concept of pointing to relevant rules, making use of the digitization of the standard to help people navigate the rules there as well. And another area that we've tried to pick up on is some of the sort of tricky rules. They might not necessarily be that obvious. So for instance, large scale suppressed demand, and I may even struggle to actually find it here. So it's here. Yeah. So there is, for each relevant section, if there is a tricky rule, for instance, suppressed demand baseline it cannot be used for large scale projects. We're aware that some people may not intuitively understand that from reading the standard, so we've provided a signpost in the relevant part of the document. So for example, establishing the baseline. Okay, so I think that's hopefully a useful summary of the key guidance that we've provided. The key area of changes I'm going to go through in detail, but it's SDGs, safeguarding principles assessment and the way they're reported, and also the stakeholder consultations. These templates will look a little bit different to you. I'm going to explain a little bit more about them as we go through. As I mentioned previously, we have aligned numbering with CDM documentation. As all gold standard templates were originally built on CDM templates, there's not actually that much change. The one area where you will perceive it is in section A, and I'm talking about the project design document here. So you can see on the left-hand side here, this was the previous numbering, and we've aligned it with CDM numbering on the right. It's all the information, it's just condensed, and the guide bridges the gap for you. So that's one of the key changes in section A. B and C are completely the same. Section D, in the old version of the PDD, there was a lengthy table that developers would fill in as their safeguarding principles assessment. This is now included in the appendix, and the reason we've done that is for clarity, with the thinking that section D in the project design document, the information that we want to see for the majority of the years of the project is what does the safeguarding principles assessment look like for monitoring. So section D is a summary of monitoring information on safeguarding principles. One thing we did move into section D as well is gender. So it used to be section 8.8, we've moved that across. Quick one on on stakeholder information. So section E, we've clarified that it's more about the information that is relevant to monitoring. So the stakeholder consultation report is a lengthy, detailed report that covers very well what happened in a consultation. The bit that we need in the PDD is how that information translates into monitoring. So talking about the main changes that you might expect. So SDGs, so if you recall on previous versions, there was very little guidance other than to say what SDGs are you targeting. Obviously, the standard would provide an instruction on how you would demonstrate a contribution. What we've tried to do here is produce a table that tells people what the standard expects. So SDGs is split into two parts in the project design document anyway. So just for clarity, I'm going to show you that on the screen. So, and I'll also make use of some of these hyperlinks that I've been talking about. First of all, there is a summary of information that's right at the start of any PDD. But in order to get to that summary, you need to go through a demonstration process of how you are making an SDG contribution. And this happens in B6. There is no change there. I'm sure that looks familiar. What doesn't look familiar is this table, and it talks about relevant target, and it clarifies that the SDG impact is an SDG indicator, or it could be your own SDG. Or your own proposed indicator. But the one thing that must be common is an SDG target. So once you've completed this table, the summary information that you provide in table 1 is a simplified version. The best way for me to show that is on screen. So B6.1 here, once the SDG impact has been demonstrated via the indicator, it is the indicator that moves across to table 1, so that some numbers can be attached to the estimated impact, and also the units or the products requested. So hopefully these tables will clarify what is expected at each point, and how the information should be excuse me, transferred. Just to pick up on the definition of a product, people have different understandings of this, and it's not actually defined in the standard. So in collaboration with Gold Standard, we've provided some examples of products just so that it's very clear for people that there is a difference between an impact statement and a product. So again, these are the types of guidance really that are not present in the standard, but I think will help people understand how the reporting should work. That's SDGs, excuse me. And just before I go into this one, I should mention, if anyone has any questions, rather than raising your hand, please type your question into the chat box. We will have a Q&A session at the end of this webinar where we'll go through the questions. But the advantage of typing it across is every question that you ask, we will provide a written response to, and it will be shared with the group. So please make use of that chat box if you have any questions as I'm going through. Okay, so back to going through some of the details. So safeguarding principles assessment. As I mentioned briefly earlier, the entire assessment has now been moved to an appendix. It's just monitoring information only that's in the main body of the PDD. So I'm just going to show that on the actual document so you can see what it looks like. So Appendix 1. So this is what the safeguarding principles assessment looks like now. And one thing you will notice is that the key requirements are present in the table. Previously, the table was blank, and I think one of the disadvantages of that is for us in assurance and for you as developers, the first thing you need to do is make sure that you're capturing all of the right information. So hopefully we've made that a bit more straightforward by including it for you. So some of the just to describe how the assessment should work. So one thing that we would really like to stress is that the answer of not applicable in justification for gold standard mandatory safeguarding principles is not what is expected. So I think in the past people have done that. So what the template now clarifies is with this blacked out section here, we're not expecting a response for this this safeguarding principle, human rights. Because of the fact it's numbered, these are mandatory, so they're applicable to every single project. So justification of relevance is not applicable because they're always relevant. So I'll just show you on screen what it looks like when a safeguarding principle is not mandatory, it's a question. And the way that the assessment works for those is slightly different. So they work on the basis of a question. So depending on your response to a question, and I'm just going to show this, show this on screen. Does the project require or cause the physical or economic relocation of peoples? There's a question mark, therefore you need a response in justification of relevance. In this example that I'm showing you, it's deemed relevant to the project, so therefore the requirements are relevant. So there is a slight gap in this template, in that basically there isn't enough room for this template document to have all of the requirements for all of the safeguarding principles on screen. So the approach we've taken is to say, look, we expect that some projects, these questions may not apply, therefore we didn't put all of the requirements underneath the question. If it does apply, what a developer needs to do is copy across the requirements into the section beneath the question. So, oops, excuse me. So for example, here, I've copied across one of the requirements for principle 4.2, the project shall not involve and shall not be complicit in the involuntary relocation of people. That's just one of the requirements. So because this is deemed relevant, this requirement that's been copied across from the safeguarding principle requirements is relevant to this project. So a developer needs to demonstrate how they will achieve these requirements through design, management, or risk mitigation. So I'll just put an example here. So all relocations will be voluntary, will be assured by obtaining free, prior and informed consent from all affected stakeholders. And in this example, it's pretty clear that, you know, for this to be a credible statement and a credible demonstration that this requirement is met, it has to be monitored. So there is a what's called a mitigation measure that's been added to the monitoring plan. And then I want to show how the information from the assessment template goes across to section D. So recall we would complete the full assessment here. And let's say, for example, 4.1, the requirement does apply. There is a monitoring requirement. That information needs to be transferred to section D, so that there is a very concise and straightforward way of knowing what safeguards are monitored in each project. The assessment stands on its own in the appendix. It's obviously an important part of establishing the design of the project, but for the ongoing life of the project and the purpose of the project design document, really it's about what does the monitoring plan look like. So hopefully this guide here just explains what we were thinking with how the safeguarding principles assessment should be done. I suppose I should clarify as well, for let's say this question here, forced eviction and displacement, if it's not relevant to the project and you've answered no or potentially in justification of relevance, then the copying across of requirements is not necessary. Information in how you will achieve the requirements is not necessary, and additions to the monitoring plan is not necessary. So That's probably quite dense. If anyone has any questions, please put it in the chat box. So stakeholder consultations. This one has been changed quite significantly, I would say. So our focus here was really to redesign it, and this is based on how the rules work. That the document should be really a kind of complete me properly, and you should comply. This is because I think historically this consultation template wasn't completely clear on what was a requirement and what was best practice. So we've taken this opportunity to clarify that, and in doing that, we've also removed some of the older concepts that are now not rules in GS for GG. For example, the blind stakeholder, blind sustainable development matrix. So that's no longer a requirement in GS for GG. I guess for the simple reason that SDGs are not really common parlance for many of the people who you are consulting with. One of the other things that we've done as well is we've reordered the document to match the order in which steps are undertaken, and we've also clarified the stakeholder feedback round. I'm just going to show this on screen. So if we look at this summary here, these sections are in the order that you would collate information to prepare for a gold standard stakeholder consultation. So first things first, you need to work out what information you're going to make available to stakeholders. Then you make your invitations to the stakeholders with the information that you've already decided on. It should be presented to them. Then after you've invited them, you carry out the consultation and you report on it. One of the key outcomes of the stakeholder consultation is the continuous input grievance mechanism. It's got its own section. And then the final section of this report is the stakeholder feedback round. We've spent some time clarifying this because the previous template was a little bit unclear as to where the stakeholder feedback round would be reported, whether it would be in this template, the stakeholder consultation report, or whether it would be in the project design document. So both documents have been updated. Just to clarify that really the stakeholder consultation report, it's the single source of truth for everything about your consultation. The PDD is a summary of your consultation report. So with that in mind, we've got things like talking about estimated and actual start dates of the stakeholder feedback rounds. For the simple reason, some of the documents that we see, people haven't even started their stakeholder feedback round. So it's very difficult for us to provide guidance at preliminary review if the stakeholder feedback round hasn't even been initiated. So we've got some way of people recording when stakeholder feedback rounds start, whether it's planned, whether it's actual. Of course, the reason for this is so that we can work out if projects are complying. So the stakeholder feedback round, as does the stakeholder itself, it needs to be for a reasonable amount of time. And so hopefully that provides a bit more guidance on what we're looking for with the stakeholder feedback round. I'm just going to go back to the presentation. So yeah, so I guess the highlight point really is you should read the template in conjunction with the standard to know how to both conduct and report a gold standard stakeholder consultation. It's in the rules, if you read 10.1.1, it does say that the report template documents all the steps to meet the requirements. What we've done is clarified the minimum expectations, and we've also provided some guidance on best practice. We don't We certainly don't expect people just doing the minimum necessary. The purpose of these consultations is for the benefit of the project. And to let you know how we will be looking at this, we're looking really for the key high-level points of a gold standard consultation to be met. So it's transparent, it's honest, it's collaborative. So we're going to be looking at it from that lens rather than digging into sort of fine detail about whether blind SD matrices have been conducted, which now, strictly speaking, are not a requirement, but they could be best practice if you choose to do so. So, because there have been, I would say, significant changes, it's important we talk about the flexibility. So, any consultations that were started before the publication of this new template report, you can please use the version 1 template. We don't expect people to change what they've already started. However, we do really recommend that new consultations take advantage of this new report template. We hope it clarifies things. We hope it provides people with the guidance they need to make sure they're meeting the requirements and to pass through the certification process. So, to reiterate, it's not a requirement that you use this document, but we would really encourage you to use it because we think it will help things. And the final kind of detailed example I'm just going to talk about very quickly is design certified VPA-DD. I'm sure those of you who operate POAs know that in contrast to CDM, gold standard POAs do not have a generic VPA or CPA-DD that's kind of appended to the POA-DD. Instead, they work on the concept of a design certified VPA that all the matching VPAs from that point must align with. And this design certified VPA, it goes by technology type, as you would expect. So one of the solutions we've come up with to try and guide people on what is expected here is that in the key project information box in the VPA-DD, there is a section that wasn't present previously. We now ask for the gold standard ID and the title of the appropriate design certified VPA-DD. So it's that first example that all your VPA-DDs are copying in your POA, because that's how POAs are supposed to work. So there is some additional guidance provided in the text box. So important to point out flexibilities. So we are aware that some VPAs have been reviewed differently, and this is certainly the case for POAs that are older. They've been established for a number of years. There's probably VPAs that have got slightly different designs over the years. What we would like developers to do is to use the GSID of the most recently approved VPA-DD. That way we can have a line in the sand after which some of the simplified modalities and procedures for POAs can be can be used to their best advantage going forward. So, yep. So hopefully that is some useful detailed guidance. I'm going to stop now. I'm aware that was probably fairly dense. Going to hand over to Neha, so at least you'll hear someone differently. Neha is going to talk about some of the internal change management pieces we put in place, and she will also talk you through the recent gold standard rule updates. So Neha, over to you.
Thanks, Richard. This was really helpful. It's great to see some questions already in the chat box and the Q&A box. Please keep typing in your questions as and when they arise in your mind. We'll take them at the end of the webinar. Okay, so Richard, would you be changing the slides for me? Are you okay? Are you okay with that, or do you want me to share my screen?
Yes, happy to do that. Yep.
Okay, fine. So you can all imagine what a great piece of transition this is to move to new templates, which would definitely help project developers and VVBs to perform their job even better. So a very big internal change management piece also goes hand in hand with the transition that we will be making to the new templates. The biggest one is the update of all the review checklists that we use internally, along with the review forms which we share with you all after every review. So these two pieces of document also require a major update, which has been done to make sure that all the review checklists and all the feedback forms which support the review process also align with the new templates. We've been in the process of carrying out internal capacity building exercises to make sure that the reviewers and the internal certification team is fully equipped and fully understands all the changes that have been made in the updated templates, so that they can perform the project reviews accordingly. In addition to this, as I think Richard said, there will be a flexibility which will be allowed to the project developers to help them transition to the use of these new templates as much as possible, which would mean that we might not be pushing on a few things during the review process which are required after these new templates go out, but were not sort of required or would be the focus earlier. So we are going to use this grace period to make sure that project developers and VVBs fully understand what are the changes in the new templates and what information has to go where, so that they are then better prepared for the project review. Also, we are going to make sure that the reviewers or the internal certification team at Sustain Cert follow these review checklists. I think not only from a consistency point of view, but also to make sure that these reviews are in alignment with the new updates. And we are also running a very detailed performance management system for all the reviewers to make sure that they fully stick to these review checklists. Also, we would try to eliminate any sort of new comments or new queries or sort of different interpretations or queries which are not on the checklist, but they would be subject to some sort of a review during the Sustain Cert QA/QC process. So those were some of the internal changes that we are doing to help the transition to these updated templates. Next up, are some of the recent rule updates and clarifications that have been released by Gold Standard. So there are basically three that we will be discussing today. There is one rule update, which is on the application of suppressed demand project type and applicable scale threshold. And then there are two rule clarifications, which is on the application of usage rate assessment guidelines and also on the applicability of POA version for new VPA inclusions. So let's move on to the first rule update, which is on the application of suppressed demand, project type, and applicable threshold. Richard, can you go back a slide? Sorry. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, sorry, Naya. There was like an instruction box that came up anyway. Apologies.
No worries, no worries. Okay, so to give you, a bit of a background here, this rule update, introduces changes to the eligibility requirements of small scale projects and VPAs, accounting, suppressed demand scenario to establish baseline. Well, GS per GG, do allow small scale projects to account for suppressed demand scenario when establishing a baseline. However, small scale projects and VPAs, which solely comprise of distributed units, applying the unit level thresholds, are basically not required to demonstrate compliance with the applicable small scale thresholds at the aggregate level of the project and VPA. So this, basically provides clarity on the small scale project type and the scale threshold, which is applicable to the proposed, to the submitted project activity. Richard, I'm gonna have to ask you to move one more slide back, please. Yeah, thank you. So this, rule enters into force on 13th of November, later next month. And as I said earlier, it provides clarity on the small scale project type and scale threshold. So let's take a look at, what are the three different type of project activities based on, the scales. The type 1 is the renewable energy project with a maximum output capacity of 15 megawatts. So 15 megawatt, is sort of the limit here for type 1 projects. So for type 1 projects, examples, could include solar photovoltaic, hydro, wind, renewable biomass that supply, electricity to grid, mini grid, individual households, users, or a group of households and end users. So output here, is basically defined as the installed or the rated capacity, which is given by the manufacturer of the technology or of that equipment, irrespective of the actual load factor of the plant, meaning that the installed or rated capacity of any renewable energy generating unit that involves, turbine generator systems shall be based on this specific, installed or rated capacity. Also, the appropriate equivalent of 15 megawatt here, mostly refers to the megawatt electrical. But if there are, other energy uses under type 1, then an appropriate conversion factor has to be applied. For all, biomass, biofuel, or biogas project activities, this maximum limit of, 15 megawatt is considered equivalent to 45 megawatt thermal output of the equipment. If there are, any thermal energy applications, for example, cook stoves, then, the limit, which is 45 megawatt thermal, is the installed or rated capacity of those devices. If we are talking about any, electrical or mechanical applications, then as I mentioned before, 15 megawatt, would be the installed or the rated output. If there are any, co-firing renewable or fossil fuels involved in the project activity, then the rated capacity of the system, which is, using the fossil fuel, shall apply in this case. So for project activities, which involve thermal energy applications from solar energy project activities, the maximum output, is also specifically defined in the rule update, which is 700 watts per meter square of aperture area of the equipment. If there are other conversion factors which are used or which the project developer wishes to apply, then their justification has to be applied as to why that specific conversion factor is more suitable or more appropriate compared to this default conversion factor. So moving on to type 2 project, which is an energy efficiency improvement project. I think this one also is pretty straightforward. So examples, could be high efficiency biomass fired project devices like cook stoves or improved ovens or dryers, which replace, existing devices, or there could also be, energy efficient improvements in existing biomass fired cook stoves or other, similar devices. So here, the small scale threshold is fixed at 60 gigawatt hour per year or an appropriate equivalent figure in any year of the crediting period. Also to note here is the fact that activities which improve thermal energy efficiency, in those cases the maximum energy saving, which we discussed as 60 gigawatt hour per year, is equivalent to 180 gigawatt hour thermal per year of savings. So this is I think exactly similar to the CDM definition of defining a type 1 and a type 2 project for a small scale threshold. So moving on to type 3, which is all the other sort of project activities, which would include safe water supply projects, waste management, etc. So the threshold is fixed at 60,000 tons of CO2 equivalent per year. So anything above 60,000 tons for a type 3 project would basically be a large scale project activity. Also, I think another thing to note here is the fact that GS for GG allows the application of suppressed demand scenario only in cases of small scale projects. So if a project under any of these three types exceeds the thresholds that we discussed, so those projects won't be able to enjoy the benefit of suppressed demand scenario for baseline establishment. So let's see how this update applies to projects in pipeline. So if there are any new projects or VPAs submitted for design review or inclusion review after the entry of force, and after this rule comes into force, have to comply with these thresholds and requirements, meaning that any project which is submitted for design review or inclusion review after 13th of November has to follow this the small scale threshold. However, if there are any registered activities or VPAs which are sort of not meeting the small scale threshold, may still be able to issue GSVERs, but that would be possible only till the end of the registered crediting period. And any issued GSVERs of vintages 1st January 2021 onwards will also be ineligible based on the CORSIA requirements. Okay, so that was, the rule update on the suppressed demand application and the small scale threshold. Let's move on to the next segment, which is on rule clarifications. The first one is, clarification on the application of required, guidelines for usage rate assessment, which is basically the Annex 10 of the TPD tech and usage rate guidance document. So the clarification basically says that the usage rate cap has to be applied to each monitored stove cook stove age group. So let's see what this means with the help of these two examples which I've just included here. So let's take example one, wherein the project is meeting level A. So I'm sure you are well aware of the three levels of monitoring which are discussed in the usage rate guidelines. So level A, is the mandatory one and the basic, level of monitoring, which is required to be done by all project activities. So if a project activity follows, level A monitoring, then the usage rate, the default usage rate is capped at 75%. So you can see, in this example that there are three, age groups, and based on the survey results, the usage rates are 70, 90, and 95% respectively for these three, age groups. But since the project is following level A monitoring, the default 75% usage rate is applied in at each of the age groups. So not on the weighted average, but on each of the age groups. So you can see that the cook stoves, which were falling under the age group 1 to 2 or 2 to 3, had a 90 and a 95% usage rate based on the surveys, but they both individually have been capped at 75%. And similarly, is the level B monitoring in example 2, wherein the usage rate is capped at 90%. So irrespective of the usage rate that you get from the survey results, the rate will be capped at each of the age groups. So for the age group 2 to 3, even though the usage rate is 95% as per the survey results, but it is capped at 90%. So this is one clarification which has been released by Gold Standard. Let's take a look at the second one, which is the applicability of POA version for new VPAs, for the inclusion of new VPAs. So this, clarification basically says that, any VPAs which are submitted for inclusion after the crediting period of a POA has ended, it will follow the latest version of the POA, which was available at the time when the VPA was submitted for inclusion. So this would mean that if a POA, let's say, was listed before the first crediting period of a POA ended, but this VPA was submitted for inclusion after the start of the second crediting period of the POA, then this VPA should be should follow the the PDD, which was the POA-DD, which was approved as part of the second crediting period. However, if the crediting period of a new VPA is before the start date of the second crediting period of that POA, then in those cases, the VPA can sort of submit for retroactive issuance, which is, as you all know, would be maximum 2 years before the date of inclusion. However, one thing to note here is the fact that such VPAs will not be allowed to claim more than the maximum crediting period, which is allowed as per the applicable product or activity requirements. Also, such VPAs will not be required to basically renew their next crediting period before the end of the second crediting period of the POA. It would allow VPAs to claim for 7 years straight under the second crediting period of the POA. And this flexibility, is applicable only for the VPAs that have already been listed under a registered POA before the publication of this rule clarification. I think this rule clarification came out in August. So any VPAs which were already listed under a registered POA before August this year can make use of this flexibility. All right. So those were the some of the recent rule updates and clarifications released by Gold Standard. I think I would now hand over to Richard, who will give the concluding remarks. Over to you, Richard.
Thanks, Neha. Yeah, so thanks for Neha. So yeah, in summary, what we've hoped to do with these new templates and what we hope they will provide is that they make things clearer and they will help you comply with gold standard rules, and that they will help everyone, so sustained cert VVBs, sustained cert reviewers, share an understanding of the rules, so that concept of a single source of truth that I mentioned earlier. One of the key points as well, we will be flexible to help you adjust to the new templates and preserve registered understandings as well, as long as integrity is not compromised. We will possibly ask new queries, that it may seem that we're asking new things as you transition across to new templates. We have procedures in place internally to try and minimize this. Just keep communicating with us if you find that this is causing challenges. The aim of this whole exercise is to make things more simple and more effective for us all. And the final thing, we encourage you to start using these templates as soon as you can. As we've mentioned a couple of times, there's a 3-month grace period. So after this 3 months period, everyone will have to use them mandatorily. But we hope that this presentation today has shown some of the benefits. We encourage you to start using them as soon as possible. And in particular, stakeholder consultation report. So those are the concluding remarks. Before we head off into a Q&A session, just like to mention, we would like to send everyone who has attended this session a very short survey on the pros and cons of COVID-19 remote monitoring. You're all aware that the interim measures proposed by Gold Standard allow projects to keep moving during these challenging times. We would really appreciate your feedback on what these measures mean for you as project developers, whether they're good, whether they're bad, whether they cause you challenges, whether they've enabled you to think of things differently in a positive way. So the survey is very short. I think it's 6 questions. It won't take much of your time. We'd really appreciate your feedback. The purpose of the survey is to help Gold Standard define future approaches. So you'll be aware that the interim measures are ending 31st of December this year, so something needs to be decided for next year, and Gold Standard want to hear from the people's experience. So we're also reaching out to VDBs as well, and we'll share this information with Gold Standard. Yeah, we'd love to hear your feedback. So those are the conclusions. Going to go into the Q&A session. So hopefully throughout the meeting, any questions that you have come in via the chat box. I can see a couple here, so just going to turn to those. So Neha, if I need your help, I will give you a shout. So first question from Shreya. How would the new templates impact the existing registered projects? So that is a good question. You know, and I noticed you asked this fairly early on in the presentation as well. You know, the aim is that they shouldn't impact registered projects. You know, we're very aware that, you know, changing this type of thing halfway through may cause challenges. You know, our vision really is that it shouldn't impact. What we hope is that it will just align people in the way that they demonstrate things, rather than changing necessarily, well, certainly not changing registered projects. If I suppose worst case scenario would be a tweak, but we are very much aware, and we'll do everything we can to make the transition as straightforward as possible. So thanks for that question, Shreya. So a question from Cassiana. So, and this relates to COVID. So it's a timely question. So due to COVID, PDs and stakeholders would prefer an online stakeholder consultation meeting. Have you envisaged any recommendations and or rules for online stakeholder consultation meetings? It's an excellent question. This is just the sort of feedback that we would love to see on the survey that we'll send out shortly. Cassiano will share that feedback with Gold Standard regardless. You know, I assume you're fine to do that, but this is exactly the sort of thing that Gold Standard and we want to hear, really. You know, your experience, and if people see that there are different approaches possible. So those were the two questions. From that, I can conclude, Neha, that our presentation was extremely clear today. There's no problem in case anyone does have any other questions. I don't know, maybe I'm not, I think I've got the wrong.
There are a few in the chat box. Yeah.
I thought that seemed a little bit light. So it's so just so you're all aware, we're using a new platform today. We are not as used to it as our usual go-to meeting. It seems there's two ways for you to communicate. I've addressed the Q&A questions, so now we have questions in the chat box, which perhaps is the more obvious place for people to register their questions. So a question from Virginia. So it's regarding a registered project design document. The question is, do I need to change it to the new PDD template? The answer is no. Hopefully that's a nice straightforward one. We don't want registered templates or documentations to change. It's only when you're doing new submissions. I suppose the only example would be a monitoring report. The next time we see a monitoring report, bearing in mind the grace period, it will have to use the new template, but registered documentation stays the same. Okay, so question from Sukanta. Do we need a completed stakeholder consultation report when doing a gold standard CER validation? The answer is yes. The expectation for all CER projects when undergoing gold standard labeling is that they will conduct a gold standard compliant stakeholder consultation. So Cassiana, it seems you asked questions in two places, so I've addressed that. Okay, a question from Virginia. Are you presenting on the new monitoring report template? Let's see, we've got 20 minutes left. I think we can probably do that. So I'm just going to try and tackle a few other quick questions, and then maybe we'll just show people what the new monitoring report template looks like. Okay, question from Cassiana. So previous PDD, and this is a question about key project information. There was a line, certification pathway, project certification, impact statements and products, which is not on the new version. Yes, you're quite right. Well observed. We got rid of that because it has different meanings to different people. So project certification as an option is something that GS4GG provides, but we don't really see it. An example of project certification would be a project that's not issuing any VERs or CERs. There's very, very few projects like that. And because it was causing confusion to the majority of you who do issue VERs and CERs, we got rid of it. Hopefully the short explanation I gave on what products are will also help. Again, if you take a look at the guide, I think it will hopefully clarify things a bit more. So a question from Tor, shall we transition to the new templates if we're in the middle of a review? It's a very good question. The answer is no. You know, it would just cause confusion and extra work for you and us as well. So just please continue with your review. Okay. So for those of you who I haven't tackled your question, don't worry, we will do it by email. So question from Mathsi, do you know when the special interim measures will be provided until? Will it be beyond December? So this relates to the short point that I made. Gold Standard are considering options for the future. I suppose I can put a bit more colour on that. So Gold Standard are soon to be ICL members, and all of the standards bodies certification systems are having very similar challenges as what we're expecting. And as part of ICL requirements, they're all sharing best practice to help people. So, you know, the enduring spirit of Gold Standard, and I suppose any certification scheme, is that they will do whatever they can to make sure things continue as long as integrity is preserved. Okay, question from Charla. How long can we use the older templates for monitoring report or other templates? So that refers to this grace period. So you've got 3 months from 13th of October until you have to use older templates. And so relating to Tor's point, if even at the end of that grace period, if you're midway through a review and the grace period is ended, you can still progress with your review using the versions that you've submitted. Okay, and a question from Alexandra. Will these slides be made available later on? The answer is yes. So they'll be put up on our YouTube or Gold Standards YouTube channel, and if we can make the slides available as a download as well, I will push for that, because I think it's helpful as a quick reference document as well. I'm just going to see if Virginia's still present, because yes, she is. Okay, she's asked for a quick presentation on the monitoring report. I'm just going to do that quickly because I agree. I think that would be helpful. So where are we? The monitoring report. What I'm going to do, I will show I'll show the guide, because the guide takes you through the structure as well as goes through some of the guidance. So I'll just go through the changes in the guide and in the structure at the same time. I'll try and highlight the key points so you understand what changes we've made. Just to let you know as well, there is a revision history for all of these documents. There is a track change version available. If it's not there, it will be put there very soon. just move this one. So this is the monitoring report guide. So main changes. There was a large sort of talks about verification deadlines. So, you know, there is a deadline within 2 years of implementation of design certification. Again, it's a signpost to the rule. A rule signpost again to use VDBs that are approved for your project and scope. Talk about CER labels and how compliance should be demonstrated when using CDM templates. I think that's a useful addition as well. Okay, so main changes. So what you will now notice, there is program of activity information. So this short template, you can delete it if you don't have a POA, but if you do have a POA, there's some information to capture some of the information that's relevant to design certified VPAs. So I covered that in the presentation as well. So here's that box, and this box is relevant for monitoring reports. One thing that may be useful as well is there's a new table here for calculation of product vintages. That wasn't present before. So vintages on, and this is an example table, by the way, vintages for VERs, CRs. We've also got A dailies as an example there. What are the other main changes? So there's a bit more detail on design changes and different definitions on them. So for example, you know, we don't expect deviation request forms for temporary deviations. They're for permanent changes, as this section clarifies here. Other than that, there's very few changes. One thing that I will add, so there is a section D3, and this is for community service activity projects only, that there is a short table for developers to compare values obtained in this monitoring period and one in the previous monitoring period, just as a kind of sense check on patterns in a project. So it's a transparency device. It's there to help you and to help us and VVBs. You know, all throughout, hopefully you can see that there's a bit more guidance on what we're expecting in each section. Leakage was actually missing on the previous monitoring report, so that now is present. Obviously, it's not in every single project, but those of you who did have a project with leakage, that there is a space for it now. A key clarification, I guess, as well, is on safeguarding reporting. So the way that safeguards are reported has changed in a quite subtle way from version 1.0 to 1.2, I think we're on now. And so this guide here tells you as a short instruction what the expectation is. One key point for all of these guides is that there is a clause at the start of each guide saying this guide doesn't replace the standard. If the standard changes, it's your responsibility to update your understanding. So just flagging that one. One of the areas where there is a bit more clarity, I would say, is on this final section on stakeholder inputs and legal disputes. So these sections G1, 2, and 3 were present. It's just we've provided more guidance on what is expected in each of these sections, and in particular legal contest. So how the guidance was previously written didn't make it fully clear to project developers that if you don't tell Gold Standard or Sustain Cert that there have been legal challenges, that itself is a non-conformity. It's not okay to kind of forget that these things are happening in a project. So a bit more guidance, a bit more transparency. So that's the monitoring report. So as you would expect, Virginia, and all, there's, because the monitoring report has to work for all registered projects, there's been the changes are very kind of gentle, as it were. So hopefully that was a useful whistle-stop tour. Okay, right. Okay, so I'm just going to try and go through, maybe take 2 more questions. I'm sure you've all got days to get back to. So, okay, a question from Pooja. So can microscale projects implementing distributed units for households, commercial use apply suppressed demand? The answer is yes. So the clarification that Neha was making was that now large-scale projects are not. Well, I think it's been a rule for a number of years, but really there is greater clarity with this clarification that suppressed demand is applicable at small scale and beneath. So Neha defined what small scale meant for the different project types. Okay, I'm just scanning for questions. I'll take this final question. It's from Cassiana. You've had a very attentive input today, so thanks very much for that. So can the evaluation forms for online stakeholder consultation meetings be submitted after the meeting via email? There's nothing to say that they must, and there's nothing to say that they shouldn't. I think it's a very good idea, especially in these times of COVID, when online meetings perhaps all that that can be done for certain projects. So we'll leave it there. Thanks to you all for your attention today. Thank you for your questions. As we mentioned, we'll do a transcript of all these questions and publish a response and share it with you all. Just to say thank you for joining, and hopefully that you get some benefit from this session. And we will be putting a copy of this this whole webinar on the Gold Standard YouTube channel, and we will make the slides available to you as well. So thanks very much to you all, and we will leave it there. So bye for now.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.